Hello, these are recordings of classes conducted at a world-class residential recovery centre here in Armidale, New South Wales. My name's Hartmut Günther and I'm fortunate enough to be able to facilitate these classes. So I hope you enjoy them.
Are you okay, Brad, to do the little presentation on protein today? Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you want to go, why don't you kick it off and go?
Right. The average body requires 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. Consuming more protein can have a positive impact on rest of your metabolism. Eating healthy foods like beans, nuts, fish or poultry in place of red meat and processed meat can lower the risk of severe diseases like premature death, heart diseases. Foods like eggs, lentils, cottage cheese, pumpkin seed, Greek yogurt, seafood, oats, chickpea, peanuts are sources of protein in foods. And protein is crucial to good health. There are 20 amino acids that help form thousands of different proteins in the body. And protein helps growth and maintenance of tissues under normal circumstances. And your body breaks down the same amount of protein that is used to build and repair damaged tissues. It says protein is important. Is an important building block for bones, muscles, cartilage, skin, and bone. What else do I get on? Protein helps repair cells and makes new ones. Protects the body from viruses and bacteria. Promoting growth and development in children, teenagers, and pregnant women. Without appropriate amounts of protein, you run the risk of missing out on key functions, which could eventually lead to problems such as loss of muscle mass, failure to grow, weakened functioning of the heart and lungs, and even death. That's more or less what I've
Wow.
I should have done a bit more, but yeah.
Mate, that is the clearest summarized little synopsis of a particular nutrient, in this case protein, I've ever heard. That was so well done. Thank you, Brad. I'm serious. Like every word that you said, every little aspect of protein was so clear, and it made it really it elevated the importance of that particular nutrient. So thank you. It was well done, really well done. Awesome. What I'm going to do as usual, I've prepared a little bit for this, and we've, over the years of facilitating this class, of course, we've talked about protein before. So I'm going to elaborate or fill out some of the things that Brad has covered, just about all the points that I was going to talk about, but to help retain them and understand them in our memory, I've got a little bit of material that we can use to make those points even clearer, so we can understand it. So when we're walking around in a supermarket or a market or a health food store wanting to buy something, we're not just remembering the key points, but we understand. There's a difference between remembering something and understanding something. Like if you understand that protein is important and there's X amount that you need, and that's the first thing that Brad said, you need about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Well, then after a while, rather than just walking around memorizing that, you can get a feel of it. And I wanted to fill that out and give practical examples, like, you know. So anyway, we'll do that a little bit as well. But before we do that, Michael or Graham, any questions for Brad? Anything you disagree with?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I just learned, I didn't know that chickpeas were high in protein, and I used to snack on them a lot. You could buy packets of snack peas in the health food snack aisle.
Yeah.
Like next to the veggie chips and all that sort of stuff. I used to buy the chickpeas, and they're like lightly seasoned. I used to munch on them at home in front of the telly. No, I was on a good thing there, I realised, because they're full of protein.
It's good to know that some of the things we did were on track, wasn't it? They're the ones that are deep fried, like from the Indians do that. Is that the one?
I think, yeah, crunchy.
Yeah.
I remember crunchy. They're not like the ones in the salad bar.
Right.
Just soft and they wrapped up nicely.
Yeah.
These ones are a crunchy snack, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not. Okay, yeah, that's good. All right, well, that's great. Michael, anything you want to say?
No, I think Brad covered it all.
Okay. All right.
These healthy snacks, chickpeas.
I had. Why don't I just do this to get it out of the way? Because, and then we'll come back and focus on the protein. But if you guys recall from last week, Michael was presenting, magnesium, and we ran out of time. And because one of the reasons that Michael was interested in that was because of blood pressure. And Brad just mentioned heart health as well in relation to protein. So after a while, the more you find out about all these nutrients and different things and foods, you start seeing there's interconnections and overlaps and all of that. So it's not so cut and dried, so to speak. Anyway, something interesting happened last week, and I'm just busting to share it. So I have to sort of do that, but it ties in with Michael's thing. So we'll just spend a minute or two on that and then come back to Brad's focus on protein. So let me just share this screen, and then you can see what I'm actually talking about. Can you guys see that all right?
Yep.
Okay. So what I just wanted to, this may seem strange, me putting a little picture of tomato paste up there, but what I wanted to show you was how we've run whole classes on reading labels, and I'm going to come back. We're not doing that today, although Brad did ask me about protein powder, and I'm going to talk about protein powder later. But when you sort of get into this level of things with powders, for instance, it's really important to read the label. So you make sure you're clear about what you're getting, particularly if it's a supplement, because there are really high levels of certain things in there that may or may not be good for you. So, and I just discovered this by accident, so I thought I'd just share it with you. I regularly buy this organic tomato paste from Woolies because I like I put in curries, pastas, and all sorts of things. So, and I like it to be organic. Anyway, so the one I normally get is this one. And if you notice the difference, this is the smaller jar. It's only 375 grams. But Woolies recently have been stocking this one, the 500 gram. And on the surface, they're identical. They're just one's bigger than the other. But like I said, just by accident, I was actually reading the label on the back. And here's an image of the label. Now, the 500 gram jar contains, if you can see, can you see my cursor pointing at that down there?
Salt content, sodium, yeah.
Yeah, that's it, sodium. So let's just look at, rather than serving size, the 100 grams. So if you used 100 grams of tomato paste, you'd be only getting 66 milligrams of sodium. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
Okay, here's the other jar that looks identical, and here's the breakdown of that one on the back. I nearly fell off my chair. That's nearly 10 times more. You can see it down there. So why am I showing you this? Because sodium, potassium, and magnesium are all interconnected. They tie in together, and they're very important in relation to blood pressure. So I'm just finishing that talk that Michael brought up, but using a real world example of a food that has crazy amounts of sodium. Right. Have you all heard that there's a theory that goes that too much sodium can raise your blood pressure?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's necessarily true, because that's only true as far as I can understand from my research in a small cohort of the population. But let's just go with that. So my question, though, we're talking about food. Why has this one got so little sodium and this one has 10 times more? Anyone want to pose a theory or know the answer to that question?
No.
Right. Can't
No.
figure that out.
No? Okay. So I did some...
Same shit.
What's that?
It doesn't make sense if it's the same stuff and it's just more of it in the jar, like
Yep.
the 500 gram jar. Why?
Yeah.
Why is it different? It's a different recipe.
Yeah, so I did some background research. Sometimes you have to be a bloody detective to answer these questions. I actually went on to the Lego's website. It turns out that this one here, the 500 gram one, which is the newer one, which has only got 66 milligrams of sodium, has a lot of potassium. A huge amount of potassium. So they put potassium chloride to replace sodium chloride in some food recipes. So sodium has got a bad rap, so they get around it by putting a lot of potassium in, which is exactly what they did in this one. It's not actually on the label, but I looked it up on the website. So when you see the amount of potassium, it gets close to this level almost, not quite as high, but pretty high of sodium in the other one there. So look, why am I just showing you this? If you have particular issues, if you've got blood pressure issues, which Michael has shared that is an issue, it's useful to know how much potassium and sodium and magnesium you're getting throughout the day. Because some of the medications, if you're on medications to control blood pressure, one of the ways it does that, it changes what's happening in your kidneys with sodium and potassium levels in your body, excretion rates. So useful to know. If it was only a little bit of difference, I wouldn't even be bothered mentioning this to you guys. But I thought 10 times of something is a huge difference, particularly if you eat a lot of it. Maybe you don't eat a lot of tomato paste, but I do, so I thought I'd just show you the example. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
Okay, so just one last thing, and I'm not going to go into it. Last week I was going to read out this stuff to you, but I wanted to, if by chance you get interested yourself from something that we're talking about in these classes, or you are concerned you've got high blood pressure and you want to start doing some research yourself, right? Which I'm sure you've all done to some degree. I just wanted to say this because this is where I've got experience, that there are different forms of information that are credible, that have different levels of credibility. So you have to start being able to understand if what you're reading is actually credible and valid, or is someone just trying to sell you something, someone trying to flog you something, someone's trying to sell you a supplement. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So So just in case you come across this one, the key word I wanted to just bring there is a meta-analysis. And I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but I'll tell you. A meta-analysis just means that they've got, that person who's written this article, these people, they've looked at all the articles that are written on this issue, the effects of magnesium supplementation on blood pressure. Not just one article, because one article can be valid and real and good, but they've looked at all the articles, usually over the last decade, and then they've evaluated, they've talked about it, and the conclusion then tells you whether the effects of, what are the effects of magnesium supplementation on blood pressure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you see a meta-analysis, that's a good thing, as long as it's been written well. All right, that's, any questions? Okay, good. Right.
Yeah, one question.
Yep.
Magnesium, does that, if you have too much magnesium, does that increase your blood pressure?
Not necessarily. But people, you should read that article. I've actually got that article, so I can give it to you. Hang on, rather than me comment on that, what did you find out, Michael? Because you're actually interested in that. What did you think? Does it?
Well, from memory, it was something to do with your body only takes as much magnesium as it needs.
Yeah.
And you either it goes out in feces or you piss it out.
Yeah, yeah. That's true to some extent. Depending on, of course, as the dose gets higher and higher, that's harder and harder to do. So then you're going to have effects as well. So just keep that in mind as well. But the general consensus is that supplementing or getting enough magnesium in your diet is a positive thing for controlling or maintaining good blood pressure. Doesn't mean that if your blood pressure is 160 over 100 and you take good amounts of magnesium or you have enough magnesium, then all of a sudden your blood pressure will go down to 125 over 80. Doesn't mean that. What these studies show is that they want to know, if you take magnesium, does it have a significant beneficial effect? So maybe if your normal blood pressure is 160, maybe it just drops it down to 150, just in context. Does that make sense? So sometimes we have to stop thinking with extremes all the time. Like, oh my God, my blood pressure is 160, it should be 125. I've got to find something to bring it down to 125. Well, that would be good, but sometimes life is not that simplistic. So you can get a lot of benefits by decreasing something harmful for you by just 10%. That's a really important concept. So don't aim for the extremes, aim to do something. So if you get enough sleep, if you get some exercise, if you eat well, and I've got a little thing to read for you here, all of those things have an additive effect, synergistic, positive effect to helping, and we're just focusing on blood pressure just there for the moment. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
Right. Let me just bring that back up. Okay, just switching back to protein. Thanks for being patient there, Brad. So just a couple of things I just wrote down here. A person's age, gender and lifestyle will determine how much protein is required daily. For instance, men over 70, and I'm making this point because this is where I'm creeping up to. So it's relevant for me, but it'll be relevant for all you guys at some stage. Men over 70 years have the greatest requirement for protein of any age or gender group. Usually you wouldn't think that. That's not an intuitive thing to know or to realize. By the way, older men in some aged care villages, and I've mentioned this before, are given shockingly low protein diets. And they end up eating a lot of cereal and toast while their muscle mass declines and their skin continues to further droop. It's not good. Now, of course, Brad was mentioning this, but there's an interesting little thing with that too, that if you find yourself in a situation where you're eating less and less protein for whatever reason, and there are many reasons why that could happen. And let's just take the example of ending up in some sort of care facility. And this may be relevant to some of your family members. It'll be relevant to yourself, perhaps. So what happens is if you start eating less and less protein, less than the amount that Brad was saying that you need, about 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight, what happens is you start slowly wanting to eat less protein, because protein needs stomach acid. It needs acid. You have acid. We have acid in our stomach, but it works both ways. So if you keep eating less and less protein, you'll probably get less and less zinc in your diet as well, because the two are often go together. And what happens is your stomach starts making less and less stomach acid. Because there's protein, fats, and carbs. Protein is the first thing that gets hammered and started to be digested in the stomach. The others aren't. They wait. The fat and the carbs wait till the small intestine, further downstream. But the acid is important to start digesting protein in the stomach. So if you start eating less and less protein, you start making less and less stomach acid, and then you don't want to eat protein, because intuitively your body realizes that you're not able to digest it. And I've seen this so often. And then you end up, the extreme then is some of these older people just end up eating toast, and Vegemite, and carbohydrate rich, because they can digest that later on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So watch that for yourself, but also in other people that you know. And it's not that what I just said, that mechanism, of course, just doesn't apply to older men. That applies to anyone. Apply to any a woman, a child. You might have seen pictures of people in countries where there's famine or there's something really bad going on, or war or whatever, and you see the kids, and the kids have these big distended stomachs. You guys seen all those pictures?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
See them on those ads.
What's that?
You see them on those charity ads.
Yeah.
When they're asking.
That's it.
For
That's right. And of course that happens in Australia as well, in groups where there's something going on that's not right. That's because of lack of protein. It's not because their guts themselves and their stomachs are distended. That's what happens when they're just living off very basic carbohydrates. Just rice, for instance, rice, because it's usually available and it's cheap. So that's just one example. And of course, as Brad said, you lose muscle mass and a whole bunch of other things as well. Okay. So how much protein do you need? So Brad, did you work out how much protein you need a day based on your weight?
None.
None?
I never worked it out. No,
Okay.
I'm 84 kilos, so.
84 kilo. Okay. All right, good. Let's work it out. Let's do a little group exercise. 84 kilo. Are you carrying much fat?
A little bit.
What?
Yep.
Yeah, not.
A little.
Nothing.
We won't ask you to stand on the table and bare your stomach, but why did I ask that question? Because let me just see. I've got. Let me just find this. Okay, all right. You guys can see that here on the right-hand side. They're the RDIs, but if you there's a general way, and Brad's mentioned that, to figure out how much protein that you need according to your body weight. Let me just get my calculator. So I'm just going to, you might have already done it, but I'm just multiplying. So the simple rough way, and that's pretty much what I use most of the time, is that you just multiply your weight by 0.8, which is exactly what I'm going to do for Brad. So Brad claims he's 84, and we believe him, kilograms. I'm going to multiply that by 0.8, and that gives us 67 grams of protein that Brad needs per day. Does that make sense, everyone?
Now, if
go on.
If you only have that amount, like that your body requires,
yeah,
in your training, do you still think you're capable of building muscle, or do you need a little bit more than that?
Yeah. Okay. Let's just hold that thought for 1 sec, because we can talk about that, and that's a good question. Because anyway, just hold that thought, and we'll come back to that in 1 sec. I don't think I even need to go into this, but because all of you guys are pretty lean and mean and trim. I don't mean mean as in nasty. I mean you're solid. But if you were really overweight, or if you were really underweight, just want to let you know that formula doesn't work that well. And you have to use this other formula that I've got here on the right. And you use the formula that uses what's called your ideal body weight. So you can imagine that if you're 30 or 40 kilos overweight and you use that basic formula, your protein requirement is going to be a lot higher than you actually need, because you don't need a lot of protein to support fat, but you do need protein for all the other things Brad mentioned before. So then you'd use, or if you're anorexic, you've probably seen people like that, guys, girls, really, really, really thin. Well, you wouldn't use that formula either. You'd use the ideal body weight formula, which is similar but slightly different. So you'd use that formula and you're taking account your height in that formula. So you use that if you're excessively overweight or dangerously underweight. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have to memorize the formula because it's not that relevant for any of you right now, but I just wanted to let you know that that exists. So if all else fails, just default back to using the general weight times 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. So what we're going to do as well, to try to answer Brad's question, is how is Brad getting enough protein a day? And he's also asked, well, what if I'm exercising? Will that increase my protein requirements? So let's find out. So first of all, you've seen that here's what I was talking about. Reference the recommended daily intake of protein based on age group and gender, and also pregnancy status. So you can see, I just wanted to show you this because you can see a pattern there. And that's the men over 70, as I was talking about. They need 81 grams of protein per day. And that's based, they have a reference body weight. So for instance, Brad's body weight was 84 kilo, but they use lower reference body weights because most people, it's just a population average. So they use that there. But the point that I'm trying to show you here is that different genders, different ages need different amounts of protein. So you can see that the highest is men over 70 and women who are breastfeeding. That's the highest, obviously, because, you know, to make milk requires protein. And that's what those women are doing. And then it goes down here, you can see, right down to little babies. They still need 10 grams of protein per day. And if they're being breastfed, that is completely adequately met by just drinking their mother's milk. So then you can see, go back, why women who are breastfeeding have a very high requirement of protein, because they're not only having to look after themselves, they have to be able to generate 10 to 14 grams a day for their little infant. So it's quite interesting. And women over 70 have less of a requirement for protein, according to the RDIs, than men. Quite substantially less, nearly 30, well, that's not true, about 20 grams less per day. That's a general population-based figure. Obviously, if there's other things going on, it will increase the protein requirement. So I'll just jump to this slide. What are the things, because this is, again, trying to answer Brad's question, what are the things that will increase your demand? And Brad's gone over some of these, but I'll just mention a couple of others as well. So here's what I was saying. If the BMI is lower than 19, so I would be so bold as to say that most of you there will have a BMI of about between 25, around 25, maybe a little bit higher, 28. Does everyone know what BMI means?
Body mass index.
Correct. That's what it means. And it's just, all it is it's a mathematical formula that takes account your height and your weight and does a ratio. So people that have got a BMI below 19 look anorexic, or they're long distance runners or athletes. They can also do that. And they have virtually hardly any body fat because they're so excessively training. Okay. If exercise level is high, that'll increase your protein demand. So there we've answered Brad's question, but Brad wants to probably know how much extra protein does he need. Is that right, Brad?
Yeah, I just wanted to know whether you need more if you're training constantly.
Yeah. So it's a bit like, you know, how long's a piece of string? So obviously, how much more do you need, and based on how high is your exercise? If you're training as an athlete, obviously you're in an elite class, or if you're going to the gym, perhaps to work pretty hard, usually more than an hour a day to increase muscle mass. Is that your case?
Yeah, I do train like twice a day. And I do train for more than an hour, yeah.
Okay. So here's an interesting question. And this gets down to muscle, because I'm presuming, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you're focused on muscle by doing these things you're doing. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm focusing on muscle. I do a lot of cardio as well.
Right. So you're also focused on your health, which is great. So
yeah, just trying to burn any excess fat and just concentrate on building muscle. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So what I wanted to mention, some guys, like this guy in the picture there, to some degree, some guys focus on building muscle mass or muscle bulk for whatever reason. But what you need to understand or know, then I don't know if you do, that strength is muscle strength, your ability to lift something, is not directly proportional to muscle bulk. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great. So you can be super strong. I have seen really lean, two guys who are acrobats doing a mall thing. You know, I think in the mall where they're showing their acrobatic skills for the people in the mall, they were both extremely lean, hardly not that much fat. And they certainly did not have bulked up muscle like the guy there in the picture. But they could lift up each other with one hand and support that person. So they had, and I know this is true because the muscle fibers in your body, there are different types of muscle fibers. There are muscle fibers that are very focused on strength, and there are other muscle fibers that have other functional attributes. So just if you want to be strong and you want to be healthy, you don't have to bulk up. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you shouldn't, because that's up to you. It depends on, I had an actor friend of mine. He was an actor, and he'd eat a hell of a lot of chicken breasts during the day. And he was doing that primarily to bulk up his muscle. So just on that regard, there are two ways it works. There's two things going on with increasing muscle mass, if that's what you want to do. One is to increase or get enough protein, and the other one is to exercise. In other words, what's called weight-bearing exercise. So both of those things together will have a much higher effect for your outcome than just doing one. So this, my friend, if he just sat there and ate chicken breasts, which he did a lot during the day because they're high in protein, and not exercise, he'd only get a small beneficial effect. So the two go hand in hand, and that happens a lot in so many things. We'll try. It's hard to answer the question, Brad, to exactly how much more protein you need. But if you take in regards these other things I'm just going to go through just quickly, it'll help you answer the question. When I did my training in nutrition medicine, if any of these factors are present, we were taught to increase the formula to 1 of your protein requirements. In other words, instead of 0.8 grams of protein per day, you have 1 gram of protein per day per kilo of body weight. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's if you want to. But if you're actually healthy, because I've been thinking about this for years, and I've seen so many clients, and they don't have protein intakes at those levels by any stretch of the imagination. They'd be struggling to even get close to the RDI levels. So, and yet they're healthy, they're okay, they're doing fine. So you have to feel into yourself to some degree and be aware of these other factors that I'm just going through now. So what are the other things? Chronic low-grade infection, inflammation, or allergy is present, meaning any of those things will tax your immune system, and that will burn up protein. Your immune system, amongst other things, is driven by protein. If overall number of health symptoms is high, so if one of you sort of has, for instance, high blood pressure, has an allergy, you've got an infection that you're fighting, and you've just broken your leg and you're healing, well, that's like 4 things. So I would definitely be recommending you be getting 1 gram of protein per day according to your body weight. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. If lean body mass is below the minimum recommended, we've already talked about that. And this one's important, if malabsorption or maldigestion is indicated. We've spoken about that before. So if your gut is working well now, that's great. But if something's not working well, you've got diarrhea or you've got constipation or you've got something else going on. Well, they mention their celiac. Celiac means you're gluten intolerant. SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, meaning that you've got one of the clients there just recently had Helicobacter, which is a bug in the stomach that causes also low stomach acid. So if you've got anything that might be interfering with your ability to digest or absorb food, then that's a problem as well. And then the other points that we've already mentioned. Okay. I just wanted to, you asked me, did you get a chance to check that one out, Brad?
Yeah, I've been down the health shop and I had a look at it, yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, I didn't actually have a look on the back of it, but I just went down and priced it. So I will be getting some this Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm not telling you to get this particular brand, but you know, you did ask for my recommendation, and that one, and it's probably, if you went down to price it, you probably were shocked. I think it's a bit more expensive than the other ones. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, yeah, and that's because obviously there's. Is it still rated as organic?
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously that makes it a little bit more expensive. Did they have the other brand there that I was talking about, the Vital Greens as well?
I'm not sure. I never really took much notice. I went down and sussed the raw product. I didn't really have a look at the other ones. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. It's you need bloody good eyesight, and I'm just straining to read the back of these labels because the print is so small. So just staying focused on protein. Protein's made up of amino acids, as Brad was mentioning. There's like 20 of them, and different proteins, like meat protein, will have a different sort of makeup of amino acids as opposed to, say, bean protein or chickpea protein that Graham was mentioning. So people who get into bodybuilding and muscle building and the marketing sort of looks at things called branched chain amino acids. I'm not promoting that. I'm just saying this is the sort of information you will come across if you start wanting to buy things like this, and if you start reading the labels on the back. This is the sort of stuff. Is it useful? Is it valid? Is it scientifically proven? Anyone there heard of branched chain amino acids, BCAAs?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. What about you, Brad?
No.
No. Okay. So that's just something to watch out for. If it comes off, I don't want to sort of overload you with too much information right now. I want to keep it relevant to what's going on with you right now. So if in 2 weeks' time, for instance, Brad, you get into it and you come across these branched chain amino acids and you're trying to make a decision of which product to buy, bring it up in the class and we'll talk about it then. Just one thing, though, that's relevant, because there's no point buying something like this. Why wouldn't you just eat a piece of chicken or some bean or other foods that we'll go through in a moment that are high? Why would you take this? What's the answer to that?
I'm just sort of using it. I'm just experimenting with it, really. Usually, I just eat like a 4-bean mix and tuna and some rice.
Yeah. And what? You'd put a spoon of this on that mix? Is that what you're saying?
No, I make a shake and drink that after.
Okay. Okay.
So.
Yep.
And I only use it after I train. I don't sort of drink it a lot. I drink it once a day.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, there is some research that suggests that if you eat protein after you've just done some exercise, you have a greater capacity to both, to some degree, to absorb it, but also more importantly, to absorb it or incorporate it into your muscle tissue. It changes the metabolism during that time. There's some evidence for that. It doesn't mean that that's the only way to incorporate it in your muscle tissue. It's just like if you're really focused, if you're conducting a clinical trial of one on yourself, which is what you're doing, which is the same as experimenting on yourself, as you've just suggested. Well, if you're going to experiment on yourself, pay attention to the detail, because if you get a certain result, you want to know, well, what was it that you did that gave you that result? Otherwise, there's no point in experimenting. You're just trying things randomly. So, and then there might be 3 things that you've been doing, and the outcome that you want. In other words, you're leaner, and you've got a bit more strength and a bit more muscle mass. Well, then you can say, well, this is what I did, and this is what happened to me. So that's a really good thing. The reason you're taking this as a shake is because, and why wouldn't you just have a fruit shake? Why wouldn't you just, throw a banana in somewhere and a couple of nuts, for instance, which people do, of course, in shakes? The answer to that is because this baby here and all the protein powders, this one has 80% protein. I don't know if you know what that means in the context of things. You might think that a chicken breast is 100% protein. And a lot of my clients, that's what they think, because it's an animal protein, it's lean, there's no fat in it. But it's not. Chicken breast is only about 25, at the most 30% protein. Why? Because the rest of it is water. So when they analyze this is 80% protein. Well, there's no water in it, but you're going to add, say, 2 tablespoons to a smoothie, or 1 tablespoon, which I assume is what you're doing. Is that what you're doing, Brad?
Yep.
Yeah, right. So that will give you 30 grams, will give you 24 grams of protein. So now we're going to start answering your question. Now we're going to find out if you are meeting your minimum protein requirements according to the RDIs, recommended daily intake, set by the government, Australian government, of your 67 grams of protein per day. So if you're taking something like this, they're all about the same. They vary between, say, 60 and 90% protein, really high values. So this one's 80. So let's just use this one as a reference. So it says on the back here, an average quantity, which is 30 grams, which is about 2 tablespoons. Are you taking 2 or 1?
2.
2. So let's just say you're taking about 30 grams, and it says here in 30 grams there's 24 grams of protein, pure protein. So far, if you're doing this every day?
Yep.
Okay. So far, you've hit 24 grams of protein. If you like, you can tell me, and we can estimate it. What do you have for breakfast?
I usually have just a bowl of cereal.
Bowl of cereal.
Antioxidant.
What's that?
The antioxidants. I have a bowl of antioxidant cereal with a banana.
Uh-huh.
And then I train, and then I also have a tin of tuna, a small brown rice, and a small tin of 4 beans.
Is that all part of breakfast?
Yeah, you might say, yeah.
So tuna, brown rice, plus 4 beans. Is that a small can of the beans, or how?
Yeah.
Okay. Plus the smoothie, plus the cereal. Do you read the labels on the back? Do any of you read labels on stuff you eat?
Sometimes.
Sometimes I do.
Okay. So on any food you eat, one of the things that, according to the regulations, they have to tell you how much protein is in it. They also have to tell you how much energy and how much fat and how much carbohydrate. So they also have to tell you how much sugar and how much sodium is in there. So
maybe I should have a look on the back of everything that I eat.
Yeah.
And I'll
Well,
write it all down.
Exactly.
Next time I come
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good. That's what I'd like you to. Thank you for suggesting that. Because
Then,
go on.
yeah, sorry.
There you
Then
go.
you can sort of tell I'm up to the amount that I should be having, or
Yeah, exactly. I could do a rough analysis so far, but what would be more useful if you all did that as a bit of an exercise, and you can report back next week. Don't get too anal about it or crazy about it, but just as an approximate. So it's a great way. It's a great learning exercise, an important, after a while you can stop reading labels because you'll get to know things. But having said that too, I've looked at labels over the years only to find out if I look back 2 years after that, they've actually changed the formula. That happens in things as well. So some cereals are high in protein, higher than other cereals. So don't forget to include if you're putting milk on your cereal. Is that what you're doing, Brad?
yep.
Yeah, there's protein in milk as well. There's protein in virtually everything, and I'm just going to show you that in a moment. But obviously, some things are much more significant than others. So we're just using this exercise, focusing on protein, also then in your homework, loath to use that word, just for the next week, to do a bit of label reading practice. And that would be useful for Michael and for Graham as well. Well, useful for all of us. So, yeah. Are you going somewhere, Michael?
Yeah, I have to go. I've got to go to the hospital for the
Oh.
doctor's appointment. So
No worries. See
Yeah.
you next week.
see you next week.
Yeah, good
Thank
luck
you.
with your hospital. Thank you. All right. Let's just finish with, can you all see that?
Yep.
That's some grains. These are what they call non-gluten grains. So you can get to see, and they're all based on about half a cup, which is what you'd eat. And this to some degree relates to normal bread as well, or wheat-based cereal. So you can see on a normal serving size, you're getting something like 10%. The lower ones are down to 5%. So of your RDI of protein. Just get a rough idea with that. Any questions on that? That comes from that. Okay, so we'll just do this and then we'll leave it for today. So this is from the book that were you looking at this book, Brad, when you did your presentation?
Yeah, I did have a bit of a look at it.
Yeah.
Your books. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to not to focus on any detail in particular thing, but just to highlight, can you, I don't know what you can see at your end, but can you see me moving that pointer and the mouse around when I'm doing that?
Yeah.
You can. Oh, great. So Parmesan cheese, just 3 blocks, interestingly, gives you nearly a quarter of your RDI. This is an RDI based on a woman of childbearing age. So men will have a little bit higher and children will have a little bit lower, but it just gives you a ballpark sort of idea. So, which is quite astounding. Anyone know why Parmesan cheese is so high?
No.
It's made with egg white.
Right.
Well, there you go.
And egg white's high in protein. And then as you get down, it starts going down, because what will happen is the proportion of fat increases and the proportion of protein decreases. So you can see different things here as it goes down. Ricotta is usually rated as a high protein cheese. Well, it's actually more accurately a low fat cheese. So it still has a substantial amount of protein, but not as high as up there as the Parmesan cheese. This one's interesting just for the milk. As I was saying, Brad, you'll get an idea here. Here's normal whole milk down here. And if you have 1 cup of milk, you're getting 7.69 grams of protein. You can use the book, by the way, if you want to get more accurate. So this is this tells you the amount, the serving size, tells you how much protein is actually in that. That's the red figure there. And it gives you an approximate based on the RDI. But what you're trying to do is add up these figures here in red. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So presumably you might have half a cup or a cup of milk or more, and you can figure that out from there. If anyone is able to access sheep milk, I don't know have you ever tried it, Graham?
Not sheep milk. I've tried goat's milk.
Yeah,
Had that
right.
before.
Yeah, I've had
Unusual.
goat's milk too. Unusual flavour. I didn't know sheep milk. It's in different cultures. You know, some cultures have buffalo milk. Some cultures have camel milk, horse milk. In Eastern Europe, they drink horse milk a lot. So good old sheep milk is really high.
Good old horse milk.
Yeah, I know. It boggles the mind in how they milk these animals, but that's another story. There's human milk. Obviously, that's not readily available to you at this age, but you can see that 1 cup gives a young baby about 2.5 grams of protein. So they have to drink a lot of milk during the day to get enough. That figure there is interesting too. Might be a bit relevant for you, Brad. Whey protein, like a lot of the protein powders are based on whey. Whey is just an extract of milk. A lot of the protein powders. Go on.
The one I've got is whey. It's a leaner sort of protein. But yeah, it's got whey in it.
Yep. Whey and soya protein are the two main other types of protein. By the way, this raw one is made from organic pea protein isolate and some organic whole brown rice isolate that's been sprouted and biofermented.
What's the name of that one?
What's that?
Just raw. So it's just raw, but like with them products, is there like ones? Is there different ones, or are they just all covered? It's the same sort of.
They've got different ingredients in them. So if you walk into a shop, you know, they have those muscle building shops or even a section of the health food shop. Most of the stuff. Go on.
Yeah, sorry.
There you go.
I've got one at the moment. It's banana flavour. And I didn't want to go with the chocolate flavour or anything because chocolate's sort of got more sugar and stuff in it.
Bring it in next week and let's dissect the ingredients, and I'll give you, for what it's worth, my opinion on is it good, does it contain possible other contaminants. If you do that, because, I mean, you're focused on getting protein, but you don't want to be taking in other things that are harmful for you at the same time. Unfortunately, protein powders have got a bit of a bad rap of having, not all of them, but having contaminants come into them. I'm talking things like arsenic and lead. Not good. And I've actually written an article on that. So if we go down that road next week, we can, but bring in anything you're eating or taking and we can dissect that, and you can get a handle on or get a sense or a feel, is it good for you? Is it actually doing you good, or is it potentially doing you some harm? With eggs is sort of the reference. They use the egg, a whole raw egg, white and yolk, as a sort of a reference food that is supposedly the best content of protein, and including the amino acid profile within that protein as well. For those of you who want to know, one egg, like it's got it here, you're getting about 6 grams approximately of protein. So if you eat 2 eggs for breakfast, you're getting 12 grams of protein, which is which is significant over the course of a day. And there's no carbs in that. So don't go off. I've had a couple of young guys come through where you are, and they get into these egg white. They have like 10 egg whites for breakfast. Because the theory...
What's
that?
When the last time I was incarcerated, I was eating 13 egg whites a day.
There you go. How did you get that many egg whites?
Oh, when I worked in the kitchen.
That's
Okay.
very good.
I worked where we used to prepare all the meals. So.
The perks of working in the kitchen. Two myths about that. If you eat a lot of egg white, it depletes you of, I think it's biotin, one of the B vitamins. Not good. Secondly, and it says it here, you see that egg white, egg yolk? So yes, the egg white has got 3.6 grams of protein, but guess what? The egg yolk still has 2.7 grams of protein. So it's not like, geez. And all the nutrients, all the vitamin A and all the other fantastic nutrients are all in the egg yolk, not in the egg white. So consider.
But a raw egg would be better than a cooked egg, wouldn't it?
What's that?
A raw egg would be much better for you than a boiled egg.
Yeah, my father used to eat raw eggs. Well, that whole thing I just said, did you eat those 13 egg whites raw or cooked?
Cooked.
Cooked, yeah. It's safer. You don't have to overcook it, but it's safer to cook it because if you cook it, A, it kills any potential bugs in there, and B, it doesn't deplete the biotin that I was just talking about. So, and you don't have to I eat two eggs nearly every morning for breakfast, and I just slightly undercook them. I just boil them. So the egg yolk is still completely runny, and sometimes so is the egg white. So sort of a middle ground there somewhere. Anyway, just to finish this, because we're running out of time, you'll see there, like there's fish, and now we're getting up to animal protein. And we're talking significant amounts now, 25 grams. So that's what you're eating also for breakfast there, Brad, the tuna, something like that. And if it's an 86 gram, I've standardized all the weights so you can compare them more accurately. So you can see different fish, like a flathead, which I really like. It's got the lowest amount of protein, but it's still significant, of course. Still got 10 grams of protein, whereas the tuna, for some reason, has 25 grams of protein. That's huge. So there's downsides, by the way, of tuna. Talk to me next week about that. I'd recommend a different fish for you, Brad, rather than tuna. But ask me about that next week. There's reasons for that. Anyway, you'll see it as you go on. It's no big surprise. All the animals have high amounts of protein. So just to finish quickly, there's the fruits. So the fruit with the highest amount is prunes. It's only 5%. Don't think that that's not useful. That's still giving you something in the course of a day when you add it all up. And there's your beans. Well, there's tofu, particularly. A lot of vegetarians eat that, and tempeh. And then it gets into these sort of beans here. So they're up around 15, 20%. So that's really good as well. And then it goes through all the meats and different things. Again, all that. And there's your nuts. Yes, walnuts and nuts are high in protein, but not as high as people think. So need to combine it with other things as well. All right. Yeah. Almonds are actually quite good, but then you can see that walnuts are even better as well. I make a nut butter, so I have both of those things in there. All right, let's leave it there. Better let you guys